Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to SuperCoach Edge and of course another edition of Damo's Team Talk, this time coming out of round 15. And well, what a change in fortunes. That's one way to summarise the round that was. It was a round that we were hoping to have across some stage or another of the bye period as a collective, and to come out and have the score that we did, especially in the face of, I think a lot of the, majority of the oppositional coaches out there didn't really have the same level of, scoring of being a good week as I did. So there was a bit of a pod element to it as well, which is really good and gives me faith and just restores my faith that I had, I guess, in my team. I wasn't losing faith per se, but, when your team isn't performing, with your primos popping off at the one time collectively, it makes it really annoying, I think, is probably the word for it. Because, you're upgrading your team, you're bringing in extra primos week on week, and you're not seeing a real improvement consistently week on week in terms of scoring. So let's get to my scoring and unveil finally what I am referring to. And it was a very big score of 2,314. So, wow, it was by far and away the biggest score I think that we've had all season. Might have been another, I'll have to have a look back through the archives, but I was not expecting this sort of score across the bye rounds at all, especially considering it's best 18. And we've virtually scored, an extra 500 points above sort of the par. If you're kind of averaging things out where, it's 100 points per player across the best 18, that gives you a score of 1,800. But obviously scoring well above that par, just kind of, epitomizes how big a score my team had. So 500 points virtually above par if you were to equate 100 points with every one of those best 18 players. So just an incredible performance all round. And as I said, just restored faith a bit, I think, in my team, more so than what I already had. I always say in terms of just having faith in your structure, because it will pay off. And it's paid off at a really good time, I think, because, we were looking for a really nice buy round across the, 4 or 5 buy rounds collectively to help us, get ahead of where we were placed ranking-wise heading into the buy period. As I've always said, it's really easy to compare your team within an individual week or bye week, which I think is kind of fraught with danger because every team is different, the mix is different, the structure is different. And my team, just speaks to that again, because I had a really good week this week. Other people may not have, but again, it comes down to structure, matchups, everything else. So a little bit of luck came in my way, which, is quite welcome because I think I've had some pretty poor luck thus far, just with, guys not performing in matchups where they probably should have. But ranking-wise, just with regards to that, we've made real big ground here. Almost cut it in half. So we ended up rising 4,711 spots to now crack well and truly the 10K mark, to now sit ranked 5,992nd overall. So a real big rank rise there, and really, as I said, welcome. It was a week that we needed, and again, just restores faith. And yeah, we're quite well placed. We'll get into now my team, and first and foremost, the changes that we made, because one of the big changes we didn't discuss during last week's team talk, because the move that was made was contingent upon the team selections. Obviously came out on the Wednesday leading into Thursday, and it was the first game of the round between Freo and Essendon, and you can probably guess who it was. So I was getting incredibly frustrated with Rowan Marshall. He had that really nice score first up when I brought him into my team, but ever since then he's been averaging putrid, like 80, 90 odd, if that. Had a score in like the 60s or thereabouts, and I just thought to myself, you know what? I've been pretty sensible in terms of not doing too many sideways trades, if any. And any that I have done have kind of benefited my team, and I don't think, have backfired. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I've got some excess trades in hand, And I want to use one of these trades to bring in this big dog who had a really, really nice matchup against Essendon, and it was Luke Jackson. Up against the debutant in Vicentini. He was always going to have a day out. And I was like, you know what? Get him in your team. He, in terms of ruckman, I think ranks probably I think it's number one overall in terms of hit outs to advantage. So he's not just someone that I'm bringing into my team for 1 week. It's someone that I'm confident in for the remainder of the season in terms of, the scoring ability, but also the fact that Sean Darcy was out. Now, the caveat to this is Sean Darcy's been back, I think, for a couple of weeks, had a bye round, and now has to be rested by Freo. And I'm like, if you're having to be rested after 2 weeks of returning from an injury layoff, your body is absolutely cooked. And it says to me that he's going to be, nurtured throughout the remainder of the season, Sean Darcy, or he's going to be rested, or more likely, body's going to break down again. So that's really only going to bode well for Luke Jackson. And he's shown an ability as well to really score well, because outside of being the number one ruck, when he's had to share the ruck with Sean Darcy, he's actually played as an extra midfielder and scored very, very well. So a lot of things going for him here. Since round 3, where he scored a 165, he's gone 115, 64, 111, 143, 163, 122, 100, and a 186. So a really, really good performance and showing from Luke Jackson across the entirety of the season. And he hasn't been number one ruck for all of those games either. As I mentioned, he's played as the extra midfielder, and, that's kind of where he does his best work. And it's good to see that Longmuir is really in tune with that as well, because he's very similar to TDK, where I think he's better ruckman than TDK, because TDK doesn't really do his best work in the ruck in terms of hit outs to advantage, but he does his best work, much like Jackson, at ground level, at the stoppages, and playing as that extra midfielder if he doesn't get the hit out. So really, really love the look of Jackson. Brought him in, and he rewarded me first up with that 186. I popped the VC on him, no risk, high reward, and 186 is by far and away the best captain/VC score for the season. So we were rubbing our hands together after that, and we were very, very happy. Outside of that, in terms of who we brought in, let's have a quick look. So ended up, obviously, Marshall to Jackson, and then we ended up upgrading Elijah Hewitt from West Coast to Callum Mills, who were always eyeing off with Hewitt going into his bye. And Mills, he absolutely rewarded us as well, first up with a 121. He was kind of earmarked as being my flex player, but things may change in the context of what's happened in round 15, because there's a guy that I'm eyeing off that I want to bring to my team on field, or potentially being a flex, and then allow us to put Mills on field in defence. And of course, we have DPP swings as well, that we can fill the remaining hole that we have in our team that's remaining for a primo upgrade. So we've only got one upgrade remaining across our entire team, which is very handy because we've got 6 trades in hand. Ideally, we want 4 trades for injuries. Now, conscious as well that we have, 24 rounds. We've got 8 rounds to go. So, we have to be very, very cautious with it, because, half a trade around virtually averages out to, it's not the best. But as we saw last season, we had a whole host of injuries, especially I think it was around about round 18, where we still had a 23rd man, which was McKercher last year, and we had trades up our sleeve, but we had Rankin go down suspended or injured at one stage. We had Gawn go down injured. We had Took Miller out. We had Charlie Curnow being out as well. Sheasel going out for the last round, I think it was, and I had to cop a donut. So all that is burnt into my memory, and I'm very, very conscious of not burning through my trades super quickly at this stage of the season. So just keeping that in mind. But we will discuss all the trades a little bit later in this episode. But first and foremost, let's go through line by line, the stars of the show, because there were some very, very big scores, and big scores from a couple of players as well that, are starting to get a little bit of continuity in their game with their ceiling scores, which is very, very happy. I'm very, very happy with, of course. So let's start with defense, and Max Holmes wasn't the biggest score, but again, he turned up 110. So he's now scored 100 plus in, 5 consecutive games. And 6 of his last 7 games So some really big scores amongst that as well. 134, 128, 152, and 155. So really hitting his straps now. Now faces Richmond as well in round 17 after their bye in round 16, of course, which he now has. But yeah, he's just, again, been a real pillar of consistency and turned his season right around. Jack Sinclair, he had a rare down game for him, 65. I've been speaking about him as being our constant in terms of the consistency of scoring from week to week since we got him in our team. But a 65, he was, I don't know if he was shut down by Lipinski or whoever was playing on him, but a real rare game that was a bit of a downer from him. We have Jordan Clark, should say, from Freo. He scored a 119, a nice little score from him, which was sort of, more of a ceiling score from him because, he's been tunning up, but low tons. But, he just showed on the weekend, reminded us that he is, a very, very good player. And when he does have the ceiling scores in his arsenal, when he pulls them out, geez, they are incredible. So very nice to see from him. Harry Sheasel, another ton, 103. You will take it. We'll definitely take it. I think a few people have jumped off him as owners, but he's turned up in the last 3 games, 137, 115, and 103 after a couple of down games with 77 and 63. So he's turned things around there, which is very nice to see. Getting CBAs, everything else, and I think that role and speculation about his role is going to continue, but as long as he keeps punching out tons, we'll take that every single day of the week. Dane Zorko, 105, should have been more than that, but ended up padding a lot of his scores late in the fourth quarter with a lot of a kick-to-kick there, and thankfully so because he wasn't sort of in line for a very big score. He gave away a 50, which I don't think was there when he went into the protected zone, and then he gave away another 50, I think, on top of that as well. So had some points deducted from his score, but yeah, as I said, he kind of salvaged things with a little bit of kick-to-kick to ice the clock late in the fourth quarter. Now, the big downer here is Lachie Whitfield. Only scored the 16, looked as though he had his role again back in defence, was scoring quite well early on. Went off with under HIA with concussion protocols and ended up being subbed out of the game. And we are thankful that it was a bye round that it's happened in. And of course, Whitfield has the bye heading into round 16. So obviously he's going to have the week off anyway, even if he wasn't concussed. We just are hopeful that he does make it back in time for round 17. I think he will. I think he's going to make it back on the 12th day of his concussion protocol. I'll have to look into that a little bit more, but hopefully he makes it back after the week off because what I found out is a lot of my main sort of cash leagues and stuff, a lot of my opponents don't own him. So the fact that he is popping off and getting back to his regular high ceiling scoring is a big, big benefit and a nice little sort of feather in the cap there as a bit of a pod in leagues. So I hope he makes his way back. And as I said, timing probably could have been worse in that context there. Now on the bench, Matt Carroll scored a 63, again went up in price. Good to see, went up 23k and has now increased 133k in profit. Priced at 232.1k and has a break-even of -8. Should stick around in the team as well for Carlton and plays first up against Port Adelaide. So if you want to whack the old emergency on him to get yourself a little bit of a look of his scoring, if you don't have any buy plays in defence, you can do that and do some looping if you have a non-playing player as well. But outside of that, Angus Clark, 65 for the Dons, turned things around after a bit of a downer in terms of scoring the previous round when he scored that 29. So went up 22.2k and has increased now over 100k in profit to the tune of 104k. He's a little bit of an interesting one because he goes into his bye, much like Zach Johnson as well, who I have in my team, who was on the bench, increased in price as well. He went up 41.7k and has now increased 107.9k. And both of these boys have the bye. And I imagine those of us out there that don't own a Tom McCarthy from West Coast, you'll have to choose between probably punting one of these two guys to really maximize profit through that trade. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but let's move into the midfield now. And Zach Butters, 130, and really, really, really just reminded me why you just love to own him because he's so reliable. He scored a 143, 101, and 130 in his past 3 and faces Carlton this week, who might do a number on him. We'll just wait and see, but we just love seeing in our team side by side him scoring quite well, Butters, alongside LeBont. He was always going to have a massive game, a big day out against Richmond to the tune of 177. So only 9 points less than Luke Jackson and what he scored. And he was always going to be our captain if Luke Jackson somehow didn't pop off with that big score. So for those of you who own Bont, you would be very, very happy. And those people that were waiting for Bont to drop in price, well, he's only dropped $700. He had a big break even, as we know. 175 it might have been, 174. 178 I think it might have been. So he's just a touch under that. But yeah, it just goes to show that sometimes it's good to wait for players to drop in price a little bit more, but other times based upon matchup, as we saw here, it's just worthwhile just getting that player in. Get him in early, and yeah, you will be rewarded because points on field is obviously what counts more than, trying to squeeze a little bit of extra money out of a fallen cash cow, or fallen primo in this case. Caleb Sarong, 149. Now, here's another player as well that I was referencing at the top in terms of someone who's recaptured his ceiling. Past 2 games, 142 and a 149, and has gone up 28.5K on the weekend. Still a really, really nice price point, priced 45.2K below his starting price at 578.2. So if you are in the market for a midfielder, I would highly recommend him. He was absolutely incredible. Finally, it seems as though he's playing well, but also is getting rewarded for the points for playing well. I feel as though there are games there where he's been playing quite well, but champion data aren't affording him the points that I think he probably should get. And it's kind of flipped now where Sarong's playing quite well, getting high scores, whereas Brayshaw is doing the opposite. Only caveat here that I'm a little bit worried about is that teams may start to tag Sarong again. Again, early as this weekend coming up, round 16, we might see Winhager go to Sarong, which will be quite annoying if that's the case. But as we saw with Nicky Dacos, which is a bit of a segue here, he was able to score quite well against Winhager because he scored a 157 and another big ceiling score here. So many 130 plus scores, so many 150 plus scores this week. It was just a welcome sight. Plays West Coast in round 16 this weekend. So he's going to be an incredible watch and speaks for itself, a real big VCC option. Scored the 157, as I said, against St Kilda, and, a welcome return to form because went up 23.3K. A lot of people out there may not have him, or maybe they've punted him because he was dropping in price with the intention to get him back. And now's the time to get him back, considering he is facing the Eagles. Alongside him, Adam Chera had a little bit of a down game, 95, probably more so of a floor game by his standards if you look across his scoring. Didn't score a ton for the first time in 5 weeks because he scored a ton in the previous 4 weeks. So he is someone, I think, as I said, he's reliable, he's consistent, and he is going to be a constant in our team for the remainder of the season. One guy who we're disappointed with a fair bit is Lachie Neale. Since we've had him in our team, he has disappointed. I think it was the first week we had him in. He scored putridly against North Melbourne. Then finally got a very nice score against Melbourne and Hawthorn, and then went to shit in a nice matchup against Essendon with an 89. Since then, has scored 92, 103, and a 72. Those aren't scores which are going to cut it. And it seems as though Neale is it was very strange because he wasn't really being tagged from what I saw. I may be wrong, but from what I saw, I couldn't spot any tag there. It was just a really big off game by him and by his standards. And so much so that he's actually slipped now in terms of being the 14th best scorer for midfielders at the moment. So he's dropped away massively, dropped for 24.1K in the weekend and has dropped 124.2K below his starting price. Still in 29% of teams, but I just feel as though that we might be at a little bit of a flashpoint here to, obviously he goes into his buy in round 16 and we have to make a choice of whether or not we keep him or maybe we punt him and kind of anti-pot him just to try and work our way up the ranks. We're kind of at that point now where we have to start thinking along those lines to make way up the ranks and everything else because, whilst our team is, going to be differentiated with other teams based upon the mix of players that we have, there isn't just the one play of getting a pot in your team to really get, I guess, leverage over the competition, you can anti-pod players as well to get leverage over the rest of the competition as well. So that's something that we will consider and we'll chat about shortly when we go through trades. Jai Caldwell, 125, probably has been one of our best pickups for the season since he's been in our team. Way back in round 11, he's gone 119, 123, 102, 111, and 125, and has increased in price over that time, almost 100K. In fact, almost, it would have been, almost 100K. So it's just an incredible performance by Jai Caldwell. Looked really, really good. So he will be another constant. Almost slipped up there. He will be another constant in our team. Excuse me. Clay Hall obviously was on the bye, didn't play, and even if West Coast weren't on the bye, was he going to play? Maybe not. Zach Johnson scored a 32. Had a real down week, as I mentioned earlier. Still went up in price, 41.7K. Has a break-even of 14, but has the bye. So as I mentioned, we'll have to choose between either getting rid of Clark or Johnson based upon, I guess, where we're best stocked or where we need coverage in a specific line, because Clark is a defender and Johnson is a midfielder. Sardell Hawley is injured and Boxall did not play for St Kilda. Tristan Sherry scored a 79, a down game by his standards. Had to face the two-headed dragon, if we want to call it that, in Pitnet and TDK. And just a bit of a down week by him, by his standards, but he'll bounce back. He's a gun. We know what he can deliver. Luke Jackson spoke about him, 186, went up 16.8K and now sits priced at 645.4K and has increased in total 136.1K. Has a break-even of 94 and faces the man that I traded out for him in Rowan Marshall this weekend. Hopefully Shrek Darcy doesn't return because that would be handy. But even if not, we'll back in Darcy, as I mentioned earlier. He's an incredible player. Harry Boyd didn't play in R3, of course. And for the forwards, Baz Linkar scored an 85. High ownership. Whatever he scores, he affects virtually everyone. Christian Petrarca was on the bye and had the captain's armband as a non-playing player in order to lock in Jackson's VC score. Jack McRae, a really nice return to form by him. Held him over his injury layoff with that punctured lung and really was the return to form that we were looking for. Has been his best score since round 8 when he scored a 160, because since then he's gone 79, 77, and 87. So really, really good to see. And hopefully he can get to be a little bit more consistent in his scoring from here on out. But we'll wait and see. His ownership, by the way, has actually dropped by almost half, it would be. Let me just have a quick look at that again. Virtually by half. So it was 73.9 back in round 10 before he got injured, and now it sits at 36.4. So we love that. He's a little bit more of a pod in that context there because he was virtually, the highest owned player in the competition. Now not so much, but people may jump back on him. Caleb Daniel scored a 91. We'll take that. Chad Warner, 93. Good to see he bounced back after a poor score last week and the previous couple of weeks with a 58 and an 88. So getting back to those sort of floor scores, and we're hoping for some more ceiling scores. Isaac Rankin had the bye. And of course, on the bench, injured in the forward line is Campbell Gray from Richmond, and Cooper Simpson from Freo. And as we said, Callum Mills in my flex. A really nice score first up on debut with a 121. So love that from the Swan. Is he the captain? I think he's still the captain, is he? I don't know, but he was virtually like a captain's type performance there. We will take that every single day of the week. Outside of that, let's jump into our trade talk now. Now, we have 6 trades up our sleeve, and we were very fortunate in having just enough money to afford that virtual upgrade of Rowan Marshall to Luke Jackson, because it left us with 1.2K in the bank. Now, the player that we don't have in our team that we do need is Tom McCarthy. And we want to maximize, profit as much as we can at this stage of the season. And it means trading out a player at a higher price point. Now, we could do it with Clay Hall. He's priced at 204.9K. And Tom McCarthy's priced at 99K. Or do we do it with a Angus Clark from Essendon, 217.5K, or a Zach Johnson at 221.4K? Outside of that, there's no one really else that I think is at that higher price point to really maximize the profit via this direct swap. So we could do it virtually with the Matt Carroll. He's priced actually the most expensive at 232.1k, but has that -8 break even and could go up if he scores a 51 on the weekend by 26.3k. So could be sort of the last cash cow that we move on to give us some extra coin if need be. So for me, it's going to be between Clark and Johnson, and we will say Hall as well. At this stage of the season as well, we need to remind ourselves that, yes, it's still good to generate cash and trade out cash cows that have peaked, or perhaps, give you that money to then afford another upgrade. But having said all that, you don't want to be getting rid of all of your, cover off the bench in terms of those cash cows. So I am very conscious of keeping, for as long as I can, at least one cash cow in defense and at least one cash cow, playing cash cow, in the midfield. Our forward line's a little bit of a mess at the moment, but we do have some DPP we could swing potentially with the help of the flex because we have Gray and Simpson who are both injured in the forward line. But we do, of course, have trays in hand for that if need be. That's always a break glass in case of emergency type situation. But at this stage, I think we probably will. And we have to sort of work out where we can maximize the positioning side of things as well with McCarthy, because he is a defender midfielder. If we have him in the midfield, it means that we don't have anyone. I mean, we do have a swing with a Holmes, Sinclair, and Sheasel, but ideally we don't want to be doing that, because if we were to swing those primos on field in the defense into the midfield, it means we have to play, a Carroll off the bench or directly Tom McCarthy on field. So we need to sort of weigh things up here. Clay Hall, does he play? We'll just have to wait and see as well with team selections, and that's kind of going to help us direct things here. But, it's much for muchness. The difference in price between Clark and Hall is roughly around about 12.6k, and Johnson and Hall is, about 16.5k. So whilst it isn't much, in the context of, needing as many dollars as we can with dwindling trades and not many downgrades to go, it may not seem like much, but I think it can actually help you reach for, the top shelf when it comes to primos if you need to make any corrections or any sideways moves at that. So for the time being, we might just maybe trade out Clark for the time being. And I know it's really hard to choose because Clark has a break-even of 34. Johnson has a break-even of 14. We're going to go for the guy with the larger break-even. And the fact that McCarthy, if he comes into defense, it means I can swing him with Al Hawley, and I'm not sort of handcuffed to having to swing, one of those primos on field in defense into the midfield if I have McCarthy on the bench in the midfield, if you get what I mean. So let's just do that for now. McCarthy comes in for Clark. That affords us 119.6k in the bank, which will come in handy for any correction trades that we need to do down the line. And it leaves us with 5 trades at the moment. So Tom McCarthy will come on field, and Matt Carroll as well. So Zorko and Whitfield, both on the bye, go off. And what we're going to be doing here is but I think we want to use another trade on bringing in the big dog, literally the big dog. He's a big fella, plays for the Dogs. It is Sam Darcy. Now, in terms of other moves that I didn't mention at the start of this episode, I was very, very keen to get Darcy into my team based upon that matchup against Richmond. He was always going to go big. In fact, I actually picked him for 5 goals, had a little bit of a wager on it, gambled responsibly, of course, but ended up winning me about $40 off a $10 bet, which was handy. Scored 5 goals and scored a 144. And again, speaks to what I was talking about earlier in terms of if you have players that you're eyeing off that have a very nice matchup, it's always best to go early on them as opposed to waiting for them to potentially drop in price because they've got a big break even. Sam Darcy had a really big break even, much like Bont. Both of those boys went large, and if you jumped on them, you'd be very, very happy. Now, the only option that I had in terms of, because I didn't have any money in the bank, I had 1 trade remaining last round, was to do a sideways trade of Rankin to Sam Darcy. That might have been an option. In fact, actually, it wouldn't have been because I would have not had enough money. So I would have had to have traded another player to him, which I wasn't keen to do and didn't have the coin to do it. So would have been handy if I did. Would have given me an extra, I think it was 72 points on my team, because I think Lachie Neale's score of 72 would have dropped out, but it is what it is. 72 points in the context of things. We can make that up over the course of the season. But he is definitely someone we want to jump on, because in my eyes, he is the prime flex type player. Now, he's had some really nice scores. The only down score he's had is a 16 when he got injured in round 6 against the Saints, and a 76 against North in round 1. Outside of that, he scored a 117, 125, 141, an 87, 108, and a 144 against Richmond on the weekend. So has dropped in price. He was as expensive as 526.9k. So we're getting him at around about nearly 70k cheaper than what he was actually priced at top price. So he's someone we want to get into our team. And what it will do, because as I mentioned, we've got one spot to fill with a primo, but we don't really have any players at a price point high enough for us to get in Sam Darcy straight up. And we don't have a cash cow or, mid-pricer that we can then use as a springboard to get in a decent primo. So what we're thinking of doing is culling, much like last round where we got rid of Rowan Marshall. We're going to correct things, I think, in terms of Lachie Neale. Not ideal, but he's really our only option to try and get Sam Darcy into our team. We could do it with Isaac Rankin, but Isaac Rankin has an ownership that's quite high from memory, 44%. And again, I think weighing things up, it's a bit of an each way bet in a sense, because Rankin is owned high enough where if he scores well, he's almost owned by half the competition. And if he scores poorly, scores well, it affects, at least half the competition along with yourself. So I think Lachie Neale, he's owned by 29% of teams, and I'm much more comfortable to fade him compared to Rankin. So that would actually give us a fair bit of cash as well. So what we'll need to do here in order to get Darcy into the flex is just swing around some DPP here. Shouldn't be too hard. So Neale goes out. McCarthy will have to go for the time being into the midfield, and Callum Mills will go into defence on field. Now, with trading at Neale, it gives us 641.3k. We obviously won't need to use all of that because Darcy comes at that cheap price point of 459.7k. Complete that trade. Bingo, bango. And I know it's sideways. We still have, obviously, that one spot to upgrade in the midfield at this point in time. But, much for muchness. The way that we're going to try and work things now is what we can do is swing, this is coming out of the buys after round 16. We can swing Holmes into the midfield. McCarthy goes onto the bench for Zorko, and then Carroll onto the bench for Whitfield. And it means we can try and use McCarthy as a little bit of a loophole with defence or in the midfield, because we have that swing with Al Hawley as well. So really sets us up nicely in terms of having some DPP swings that are handy across the board. And what we will be doing is using Johnson and McCarthy to loop on their scores with potentially a haul in round 17. And we will wait for the likes of Johnson to increase in cash, likewise Carroll, and we will upgrade that last spot on field with a definite primo. Hopefully we can do it in one trade and allows us to have 3 trades for injuries up our sleeve. We have 181.6k in the bank, so very, very handy. Now, in terms of guys on field, let's just correct things in preparation for round 16. So McCarthy comes on field. So we will have, Darcy in flex, of course, we've got playing in round 16. Let's just show the buys, make it easier. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, not counting Clay Hall, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 players for round 16, which is very, very handy. If Clay Hall plays, that'll give us 20. So I'm in a very, very good position here, considering, would have been 3 rounds ago. I was looking ahead to round 16, and I think I was placed with around about 16 players on field. So it just goes to show, just with your planning, with trades, plan them 2-3 rounds ahead, and you can find yourself in a better position in a buy round where you may not have looked quite well in terms of coverage. So that's how we look heading into round 16. Let us quickly go through in terms of captains and vice captains. Again, for the more intimate chat about vice captains and captains, of course, as we always say, check out our episode of SuperCoach Edge weekly, and we do go through that in the I'm the Captain Now segment. So be sure to check that out. But at first glance, I think Nick Dacos, as I spoke about, is a definite option against the Eagles. Probably a straight-up captaincy option, but we will put him as, do we say the VC? We might. Who's Bont play? Bont plays Sydney, and Butters plays Carlton. So maybe one of those two boys as the vice captain. Cherry plays Meek, aka Hawthorn, and Jackson plays St Kilda. Now, if Sean Darcy doesn't play, I would be very, very tempted to put the vice captaincy on Nick Dacos and the captaincy on Luke Jackson, which is what we might do for the time being until we look through the stats and analyse things a bit further. But outside of that, that pretty much wraps things up for this week's edition of Team Talk. Hopefully you had an incredible round. I had a very, very nice round, as I said, and won all of my 15 league matchups. So a very, very rare sight to see. And let's just quickly, to round things out, go through our history because, as we've mentioned, we need to compare things in terms of where we were placed heading into the bye rounds compared to where we're going to be placed coming out of the bye rounds. Now, going to the bye rounds, we were ranked 9,425. We then slid to 9,710, slid again to 10,629, and then slid again in round 14 to 10,703. But on the weekend, made all that back and are now ranked 5,992 in round 15 heading to round 16. So hopefully we can build upon this for round 16, but we've already cut almost in half our rank that we had heading into the bye round. So already it's a success. We just need to maintain this rank and then continue on from there. The big positive of our team is that we actually increased team value to the tune of around about, 270K in one round, which is quite unheard of. That's kind of something to expect in the early rounds, but to have that type of movement is really, really good to see because team value does reflect in terms of, having cash cows that are peaked that you can then trade to primos or fund primo trades, all that sort of stuff. So a really, really good sign. And we're actually now ranked, believe it or not, a season best, 5,992nd overall. So we are in a very, very good spot to now, have a bit of an assault on the rest of the season. We've got 9 rounds to go. I did say 8 earlier, but 9 obviously including round 16. And we just cross our fingers that we've got some luck in terms of no injuries, knock on wood, everything else, and we can come out unscathed and really, really attack the last third of the season is what I'm trying to say. But with that, ladies and gents, thank you as always for tuning in. Really do appreciate all of your company as always. If you are new to the channel, feel free to give us a like, give us a subscribe, all that sort of stuff. If you are tuning in to the audio podcast side of things, feel free to give us a rating. And you can also give us a review if you do enjoy the content we're putting out, which is a great way to let us know how we're doing, really, end of the day. So thanks again for tuning in. All the very best, and we'll catch you in the next one.